He says now they FaceTimed, and Meg and Harry were trying to put on a brave face. Brave little soldiers. But they were both just honestly a hot mess. I mean, you can't really hide that kind of pain. And Tyler says that he saw in their eyes how hard things were for them. So he asked, what's up? Well, since you asked, we don't have security, and we don't have anywhere to go, and we're just so poor, and we can't afford anything, and we have baby. We're being cast out, and we have a child. How's he gonna get new shoes? Hello, welcome to the final episode of I'll Spare You the Details, where we have gone through Prince Harry's Spare, every single page. And today's gonna be a little bit of a longer episode because we've got to finish it. We're so close to the end. We're not stopping now. We're not dividing up any more of this. We're done. And then when we're done, we can talk about revenge. So don't be sad. It's not over yet. I'm not breaking up with you, okay? We still have more books to read together. There isn't anything else for me to really go over before we get into it, except for one thing. I promised some people in the comments I would talk about this. I had misrepresented something that was in the text. I misread it, and so I maligned Harry more than I should have. I don't want to be unfair. I'm not here to just bash Harry and Meghan. That's not what this channel is about. I'm not looking to gossip about these people. I truly am not. I know that, I've seen comments of people who are just like, you're just nothing but a snake. I'm not here to be rude. I just want to read the book, and I want to see like, okay, wait, what are you saying? I'm not here to bash anybody. So I'm not trying to twist anybody's words. I'm not trying to make anybody look worse than they do. I don't have to. This book already makes him look crazy on his own. I don't have to twist his words. So somebody pointed out and said, hey, look, I'm not trying to defend these people, but I think maybe you didn't read that right. And after reading what they said, I was like, yeah, I think you're right. I think I didn't read that correctly. Their concern was that in the part when he said, my family, I read it as, my family's never been there for me. They weren't there for me when my mom died. They weren't there for me now. I've always loved them. Why can't they love me in the same way? Now I went off on this tangent about it. Complete misreading of mine. And I went back and I read it, and I think they're right. He says, I love my mother country. I love my family. I always will. I just wish at the second darkest moment of my life, they'd both been there for me. So I really don't know where I was coming from with my take, because he didn't say they weren't there for him before. So I guess I was just whipped up when I was talking. Anyway, thank you so much in the comments for pointing me in a more fair direction. I want to be fair. I'm not here to just be ugly for the sake of being ugly. That's beneath all of us. Okay, now we got to get into it. Like, comment, and subscribe. Share if the spirit moves you in that direction. Okay, now let's talk about Lloyd, who is the head of his security. So last time, Harry has gotten the bitter news that the family is pulling security, the thing he feared the most. And he says, what I'm going to do? Here I am in the ultimate nightmare. The worst of all worst case scenarios, he says. And he weeps because, what could he do? He can't even protect himself because he's in Canada and he's not allowed to protect himself. No Second Amendment rights around here. He's frustrated because his security also is supportive of him. His security is like, we don't know why we're getting pulled. We don't understand this. We see it for what it is. If only everybody could see it. And so the head of his security, whose name is Lloyd, says that he keeps pleading with his superiors at home to let them stay. But even though he keeps going to his bosses and saying, we can't just leave them here, Lloyd receives a reply that says, look, the decision's been made. And as of March 31st, they're by themselves. So then Harry says he's over there scrambling for security. He said he spoke to consultants, gathered estimates. He filled a notebook with research. The palace had directed him to a firm, which quoted him a price. $6 million a year. They say that's what it's going to cost for security. But $6 million a year seems like a really steep price. I don't know. Who even knows? I'm not living the lifestyle in which I've had to employ security. Anyway, he says he slowly hung up after that startling realization. And then, in the midst of all of his already currently bad news, he gets a terrible report that his old friend, Caroline Flack. Do we remember her from way back when he was still dating around? And he met this girl named Caroline Flack. It was after Chelsea. And it's kind of a nothing relationship. I mean, it doesn't really sound like there's anything. It's odd that he brought it up in the book. And when I read that, I hadn't actually realized that she'd come to a terrible end, which we are about to discuss right now. And I thought, like, that's so weird that he's bringing her up like this. I mean, who is she? I just chalked it up as like yet one more weirdo story that has no meaning, no beginning, middle, or end. It's just a little, you know, something to say because there's nothing else to say. Although in the comments then later, people were like, Caroline Flack, you know, it's interesting he should bring her up. Okay, so apparently, well, what had happened was she had taken her own life. And he says that she just couldn't stand it anymore, apparently. The relentless abuse at the hands of the press year after year had finally broken her. And I felt awful for her family, he says. He says he remembered how they all suffered for her mortal sin of going out with him. And she'd been so light and funny that night they met, the definition of carefree, really. He says it would have been impossible then to imagine the current outcome. Okay, but I'm struggling with what he is trying to conflate here. Is he trying to say that after going out with him, she was never able to regain her footing, that the press had beaten her into the ground? That was years ago. They were a flash in the pan. I'm pretty sure he's not so important that Caroline Flack was never able to get back up on her feet. If she had personal problems, I can assure you those were her own demons. It was nothing because her life had brushed up against him, and then ever after, she, you know, her happiness had been poisoned. It's just so self-aggrandizing that after all this time, he's trying to say the press was still focusing on her because of him? Because she wasn't exactly a nobody, you know? I don't know very much about her, but I think that she had already, you know, some fame of her own before she met him. She wasn't on his level, but if there was a press problem, it wasn't one that he had introduced into her life. But then he goes on. I mean, of course, it can't just be like, let me remember an old friend and just remember her. Now he's got to bring it all. He's got to bring himself into it because he's just so self-involved. He says, I told myself as an important reminder. I wasn't being overdramatic. I wasn't warning about things that could never happen. What Meg and I were dealing with was indeed a question of life and death. But is it though? Because think about all the famous people in the world and how very few of them are murdered by the press. And if they end their own lives, in most situations, I don't think you can say, oh, it was the press that did that. Usually it's another thing. But anyway, according to him, the press can drive you to an early grave. All right, now we get on to Tyler Perry. I mean, because, again, they're desperate. They don't know where they're going to live. They don't know what they're going to do. They don't have any money. They're just a couple of poor paupers, absolute proletariats. And he says that they were having a chat with Tyler Perry, as one does. Pick up that phone and call all your famous friends. Elton John, can we come for vacation? Tyler Perry, you got a house we can stay at? Anyway, they're talking to Tyler Perry. And apparently, and this is why I say I think this was sort of a mutually manipulative relationship. Apparently, right before the wedding, he had sent a note out of the blue, in Harry's own words, telling Meg that she wasn't alone and that he saw what was happening. Well, how interesting that he should see what's happening when nobody else did. He says now they FaceTimed, and Meg and Harry were trying to put on a brave face. Brave little soldiers. But they were both just, honestly, a hot mess. I mean, you can't really hide that kind of pain. And Tyler says that he saw in their eyes how hard things were for them. So he asked, what's up? Well, since you asked, we don't have security, and we don't have anywhere to go, and we're just so poor, and we can't afford anything, and we have baby. We're being cast out, and we have a child. How's he gonna get new shoes? And anyway, so he says, whoa, okay, that's a lot. Just breathe. It's gonna be okay. And Harry writes, that was the problem. We couldn't breathe. And he's like, look, take my house. Okay, at this point, if I just got finished like unloading on someone and then they were like, here, take my house, I would be so embarrassed. I'm be like, "Ugh, okay, well, I'm not a charity case." Like, I just would feel like I would never say yes to that. First of all, would any of us sit there with millions in our pockets and be like, we're just so poor? But I mean, so that reality is so startling. It's like they're not destitute. So for them to be over there trying to gain sympathy from people when everybody knows, I mean, they're not exactly scraping the bottom of the missionary barrel trying to find something to eat or to clothe themselves with. How exactly do they think that, like, how do they think that they're going to genuinely receive sympathy from people when we all know the state that they're in? Maybe they don't have as much money as they wish they did. Maybe they don't have as much money as maybe their, celebrity neighbors who have active projects going on that will continue to pay them. But they are by no means without some kind of resource in this world. If they wanted to live a nice, normal life, like with a normal sized house and a normal, like, they could have made that money last to infinity and beyond. But they want to live like kings. And I mean, you don't have the money for that, but you have enough money to live a very comfortable life. And you have enough connections that you should really be okay. Okay, but anyway, after they get done complaining to him, and then he offers them his house. What? They want your house? And he says, yeah, my house in Los Angeles. It's gated, it's secure. You'll be safe there. I'll keep you safe. Oh, these stupid, okay, sorry, you guys, all right. I'm out in the garden shed. Do you see these crane flies? They love the light, okay? So I'm sorry, I'm not feeling, there's bugs flying around. Yeah, there are, it's called the garden shed. The lawnmower's over there, my bike's over there, tool shed's over there, and the flies are everywhere. Okay, anyway. So he says, I'll keep you safe. So now Harry's not even being able to do the one thing he promised Meghan he'd do. But they say, and this cracked me up, he says he's going to be traveling a lot, he's working on a project, so the house is empty, and it's just waiting for them. It's too much. It's too generous. But we accepted, eagerly. Of course they did. Nobody expects that these two freeloaders would have done otherwise. And I asked him, why are you doing this? And he responds, your mother. In some ways, I almost feel sorry for Harry, because it's such an obvious wound for people to just manipulate him with. And I just don't like that. I don't like that. I don't think that Tyler Perry comes off especially wonderful in this passage. And I don't, surely, after the generosity that he has offered, manipulative or otherwise, why would Harry try to throw him under the bus? But I don't think he comes off well. Like, out of the blue, he just wrote us, and, it's almost like he was looking for an invitation to the wedding, and then he offers them his home. And, I mean, that is extraordinarily generous. But why would he do that? Why would you do that? Like, what? If not, like, these people are strangers to him. If he didn't know them well enough that they hadn't debriefed him yet on their horrible crisis, to, like, in their mind, what the horrible crisis was, so that he felt that he had to ask, what's going on with you guys? Then that indicates to me that he didn't really know them, because if he talked to them for any length of time, it would have been well documented to him already, like, what their problems were. But anyway, he says he's going to do this for Harry because of Harry's mother. What? My mother? Tyler Perry says, yeah, my mother loved your mother. And Harry's caught completely by surprise. And he says that, Tyler Perry says that after Diana had visited Harlem, that was it for his mom. Diana could do no wrong in Maxine Perry's book. And he went on to say, sadly, that his own mother had died 10 years earlier and he was still grieving. Well, I wanted to tell him that it gets easier, but I didn't. Well, perhaps you could tell yourself that. So he says that when they finally get to the house, the place is like Xanadu. High ceilings, priceless art, beautiful swimming pool, palatial is what it was. But above all, it was ultra safe. And this is the thing that blows my mind. It came with security, paid for by Tyler. How are these people not colossally embarrassed to be sponging off of this man when they act, you know, it's like they are not destitute. This isn't a couple of homeless people off the street who had no other recourse in life. Why are they acting like they're this charity case that needs this kind of financial assistance and to this level? Like, how could you ever let anybody pay this kind of stuff for your life? I don't think that it's pride. I don't think that it's me being, you know, I'm too prideful to accept these handouts. That's just an insane abuse of somebody to be like, I'm going to use your home and your security. I mean, there's no plans of paying him back. There's no kind of, like, what is he getting out of this relationship? I just can't imagine anybody doing this just out of the pure kindness of their hearts for a couple of people who don't really need it. You know what I'm saying? Like, they could afford to have their own home. Maybe not the home of their dreams, but they could afford to buy and to purchase and to live in a place that was acceptable. Even if you were like, I've got to get a condo so I can afford security, if that's the highest thing on my list, I'm going to do that. I'm not looking for a handout. And this is why I think Harry really couldn't understand why the British people couldn't fund his lifestyle, because he's willing to take a handout from a near stranger, and he's not embarrassed by that. So he doesn't seem like he even possessed the ability to be embarrassed that he was sponging off the British people and being like, why won't you support me with all your tax dollars? Okay, so anyway, then this story is so dumb, I cannot even. And by the way, this is the beginning of multiple stories that are just like, this is how you wanted to end the book? I mean, it's wild, 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 wild story from here on out. And just stupid stories. Anyway, he says that they, you know, spent March of 2020. By the way, it's a pandemic, but, you know, the rest of us are suffering in our tiny little homes and we can't, you know, darken the doorstep of. But they are over here at Tyler Perry's palatial mansion. By the way, it was during COVID. How was he traveling and working on a project? Is that, to me, I was like, why is Tyler Perry not in his home? The rest of us are in our home. How is he working on a project during the pandemic? The rest of us weren't allowed to go anywhere. So it doesn't add up to me. This whole story is weird to me. Why did he give them his home? I don't get that. But he gives them the home. They are over there trying to get their bearings. There's halls, there's wardrobes, there's bedrooms. There's no end to the spaces to be discovered. And little niches for Archie to hide, so they're constantly looking for the baby. Meg introduced him to everything. Look at the statue. Look at this fountain. Look at this hummingbird in the garden. In the front room was a painting that Archie found especially interesting. Apparently, the child started every day by coming out of his room and looking at it. Oh, the child's an infant, but all right. And it's a scene from ancient Rome. And nobody could figure out why he was so drawn to this. No clue. But, you know, within a week, they had just really made themselves comfortable in Tyler's house. Archie took his first steps in the garden a couple of months later, at the height of the global pandemic lockdown. You know, they all clapped and cheered for him. And he thinks, you know, how nice it would be to have shared that news with Grandpa or Uncle Willie. You got your phone. I'm sure you even got his first steps on video. Send them the video. Why can't you? Why are you always acting like a victim? Okay, now we come back to that dumb painting. You guys, I cannot even. He says not long after those first steps, Archie was marching up to his favorite painting in the front hall. He stared at it, made a gurgle of recognition. A gurgle of recognition? What was he recognizing? You can only imagine. Meg leaned in for a closer look. She noticed for the first time a nameplate on the frame. How could you not notice that? The first time, like, they're so wondering, like, why is our kid continue to stare at this painting? Wouldn't you look at it? If you're that consumed with why the kid's consumed with the painting, wouldn't you study it? Anyway, for the first time, they noticed a nameplate on the frame. Who could it be of? Oh, the goddess of the hunt, Diana. It's so saccharine. What is this like? Oh, it's all beautifully coming in full circle. Our child is recognizing Diana, you know, the goddess of the hunt, Diana, just like Mummy, who was hunted also. He says they told Tyler, and he said he hadn't even known about that painting. He'd completely forgotten it was even there. Imagine the wealth of not even remembering what's hanging on your walls. But Tyler says, gives me chills. And Harry's like, me too. And that's what I'm saying. That is such a manipulative thing. Like, he can see that they're like really all excited about this connection. And he's like, yeah, it gives me chills. Like, I just feel like he is like also feeding into this whole like manipulative Diana, you know, let's keep bringing her in. Let's keep like ruminating and you know, marinating in the emotion of loss. It's like, I don't know why he's doing that. I don't know why he is trying to sort of ingratiate himself with the Diana memory, to sort of bring himself into the royal fold. I don't think he comes off well in this book at all. Okay, he says that, Harry says that every night everyone goes to sleep, but he could never go to sleep. He just walked the house checking the doors and windows, and then he'd go sit out on a balcony or in the garden and, you know, smoke a joint. He says that the place reminded him of Botswana. He has two memories, Mummy and Botswana. It felt safe. There was a lot of, you know, it was beautiful outside. The air felt good, I guess. He says that one of the things he liked so much about that time period was that, you know, they were able to get a lot of work done. He says, and you know, the truth is they did have a lot of work to do. They launched a foundation, and he said that he says we launched a foundation, and that he'd reconnected with his contacts in the world of conservation. They were getting things under control. But, okay, you guys, I don't have a lot of time to go on a tangent, but you look up Archwell Foundation, see how little work they've done. It's like literally like an hour a week that they do, maybe even less than that. I mean, it's like, when you look at their tax records, it's pretty astounding at what they're not accomplishing. Okay, anyway, but it was all too good to last. The Paps found out. It took exactly 6 weeks, but here they are. There's drones overhead. There's Paps across the street. There's Paps in the valley. They cut the fence. Harry patched the fence. They couldn't go outside anymore. The garden was in full view of the Paps. Next came the helicopters. He writes, sadly, we're going to have to flee. We need to find somewhere new and soon, and that would mean paying for our own security, not that. Who can we call who can give us free security? He says that he went back to his notebooks. Initially, it had just been that one notebook, but now, apparently, actually, there was like numerous notebooks full of security information. He goes back to the notebooks. He says that Meg and he sat down and worked out exactly how much security they could afford and how much house they could afford. And exactly then, when they were revisiting the budget, is when word came down. Pa was cutting him off. What? Cutting me off? How dare you? And you guys, okay, I'm going to read you a little bit of a lengthy passage, but it is astounding to me how he blames everybody for his lack of skills in life. I recognize the absurdity. A man in his mid-30s being financially cut off from his father. But Paul wasn't merely my father, he was my boss, my banker, my comptroller, keeper of the purse strings throughout my adult life. Cutting me off therefore meant firing me without redundancy pay and casting me into the void after a lifetime of service. More, after a lifetime of rendering me otherwise unemployable. A lifetime of service? Really? Okay. And I mean, what utter BS. You know, because of everything I've been doing for the royal family, I was now unemployable. Well, if you'd taken school more seriously, you might have some skills. But I continue. I was fatted for the slaughter, suckled like a veal calf. I never asked to be financially dependent on Pa. I'd been forced into this surreal state, this unending Truman Show in which I almost never carried money. I never owned a car. I never carried a house key. I never once ordered anything online. Never received a single box from Amazon. Almost never traveled on underground. I mean, once I did at Eton on a theatre trip. Sponge, the papers called me. But there's a big difference between being a sponge and being prohibited from learning independence. After decades of being rigorously and systematically infantilized, I was now abruptly abandoned and mocked for being immature, for not standing on my own 2 feet. Okay, but see, this is why I don't feel sorry for him. Okay, on the one hand, I want to say, I kind of get what he's saying as far as he wasn't necessarily set up to be successful in a typical life. Because he wasn't, exactly, you weren't raised for that. You chose to leave. So you can't be mad now that you don't have the skill set, because nobody was trying to get you ready for a life outside of royal life. Nobody thought that that was going to be your choice. But now you have chosen it. Okay, but when you chose that, you had to then think, okay, this has been my life thus far. How am I going to meet the challenges of a new lifestyle? You didn't think about that. You just wanted to blame everybody for the fact that you weren't made ready. Exactly. Like, I can't be mad that I don't get to be a doctor when I didn't go to medical school. You know what I'm saying? Like, why am I not a doctor? Why don't I get to be a surgeon? Well, that hasn't been my course in life. You know, so it's like he wants to blame everybody. So that's my one problem. I mean, that's my initial problem with this whole passage. It's nobody's fault. Nobody thought you would do this. Who could have seen this coming? But my other problem then too is he could have been set up. Like if he's like, I don't know how to be independent. I'm struggling with dependence. He didn't take school seriously. He was always goofing off. He's running out of class. He's smoking weed in the bathroom. He's, phoning in on assignments. He's getting help from other people so that he doesn't have to complete assignments. He didn't take school. That is where a child initially learns independence, is taking what they can in their world, which is their schoolwork, and becoming super dependent in that sphere. If he had stopped looking for everybody to always have the answers for him, I mean, his entire life, he can never make a step without being like, I don't know how to do it. He has always been happy for other people to do it for him. But now, that's never been a problem. Never in his whole life did he say, I want more independence. I want to learn how to do this. Oh, okay, I've got my own schoolwork. Nobody's offering me help there. I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. Instead, now what we have is him more than willing for a handout as far as help goes in every area of life. And now when something's required of him, now when he's hit the wall, now Pa's not going to pay for him. He can't stay at Tyler Perry's house. He's got to actually be a man. Now it's everybody else's fault that he doesn't know how to be. Okay. But then to just cap all this off, what should they find out? Like right at the height of all his anxieties, Meg's pregnant again. So now what? He says, finally they found a place. It had been priced at a steep discount. It was just up the coast outside Santa Barbara. A lot of rooms, large gardens, a climbing frame. It even had a pond with koi. And the estate agent warned him, the koi are pretty stressed out. So you're going to need to get a koi guy to deal with these stressed out fish. And Harry's like, me and the fish can relate. I'm stressed out too. And they laugh. Look at these first world problems we got. We got to get a koi guy for the koi pond. If you are so strapped for cash, you can't afford a place with palatial gardens, tons of room, and a koi pond. Like, what are you talking about right now? How am I going to pay for security, but we got to have that pond outside with those fish we can't even eat? So they take their tour of the place. It was a total dream. They bring Tyler Perry into it, ask him to look at it. He says to buy it. So beyond, against all odds, they managed to pull together a down payment. They took out a mortgage. So he says the move itself only required a couple of hours. Everything they own in the world could be fit into 13 suitcases. Oh my gosh. And then he goes, that first night we had a quiet drinking celebration, roasted a chicken, and went to bed early. Do these people eat anything besides roast chicken? Talk about boring. They don't eat anything else. When I read that, all I can think of was in Sling Blade, how he's obsessed with French fried potatoes, biscuits, mustard, roast chicken. Anyway, so Meg, though, great, they found a house and all, but Meg's under an enormous load of stress. She's currently got a lawsuit going. There's some pressing issues with her legal case against the tabloids. So he says that the Mail had been up to its usual tricks. In other words, the Mail was calling them on their BS and he didn't know what to do. So he's going to call them liars. He says that their first crack at offering a fence had been, according to him, it had been patently ridiculous. So they'd been trying a new defense, which was even more ridiculous. They were arguing that they'd printed Meg's letter to her father because of a story in People magazine. And that had quoted a handful of Meg's friends anonymously. The tabloids argued that Meg had orchestrated these quotes using her friends as de facto spokespeople. and thus the Mail had every right to publish her letter to her father. More, they now wanted the names of Meg's previously anonymous friends read into the official court record, to destroy them, according to Harry. And Meg was determined to do everything in her power to prevent that. She'd been staying up late, night after night, trying to work out how to save these people, and now, on our first morning in the new house, she reported abdominal pains. Okay, before we get into what we all know is going to be a miscarriage, I just want to say, if you've ever suffered a miscarriage, I am so deeply sorry. And I don't want to mock her for the miscarriage, because that's like a pain that could never, ever, ever be rectified. You will always suffer the pain of that loss. I truly cannot even imagine how shattering it would be to be so excited about a baby and then you lose the baby. So whatever I say next, I'm not mocking her and the pain that they had as a couple regarding the miscarriage of this baby. If indeed she had a miscarriage. I'm just going to leave that there. That's a lot of stress for you to miscarry a baby. Because having a baby in the first place is a very stressful situation. Being pregnant brings its own load of anxiety. I've never been an anxious person, but during my pregnancies, I'm an exceptionally anxious person. Every little thing I think is a sign that something's wrong with the baby. I'm so worried when I'm pregnant. And that's self-induced stress, but it's like a level of stress that I've never, ever had, except for when I'm pregnant. And I know that that's true for a lot of women. Also, there are women who carried babies to term beyond anybody's wildest imagination, like in concentration camps. All I'm saying is, the stress of a court case, it might be stressful, but then you need to, if you're carrying a baby and you know, like I have a tendency to internalize stress to such a degree that it makes me sick, then you need to find somebody else who can handle the lawsuit for you. You don't need to be staying up all night. Like, that was stress that you put on yourself. Like, you didn't have to. Don't stay up all night. If it's between you and the life of your baby, you need to go to sleep. Like, you can't now lay your miscarriage down at the feet of the press and say, take responsibility for a miscarriage. You are the one carrying the baby. So you're the one who's going to have to decide what you will and won't do in this situation. Again, that is a ridiculous amount of stress that you would then miscarry the baby. Because there's so many people who have been in far more stressful situations and a stress that they couldn't walk away from, that did not miscarry their kids. Again, she is an older mother, so she would have been at heightened risk regardless of her lifestyle choices. But knowing that, she should have been taking care of her body and not staying up till all hours of the night. That was a choice she could have made. I'm not blaming her for the miscarriage. Although, I know it sounds like I am. I'm just saying, if you're going to blame the miscarriage on the press, where do you take responsibility? That's all I'm asking. Anyway, she had abdominal pains, she's bleeding, then she collapsed on the floor. He says that they raced to the local hospital where the doctors walked into the room, and he says, I didn't hear anything they were saying. I just watched her face, her body language. We already knew, we both knew, because there'd just been so much blood. Still, hearing the words was like a blow. He says Meg grabbed him, I held her, and they both wept. It was one of 4 times when he had felt totally helpless. The time when Mommy had him and Willie in the back of the car and was racing all over the roads like a maniac. The time when he was in Afghanistan in Apache and couldn't get clearance to do his duty. The time at Notcott when his pregnant wife was planning to take her own life, and now. He says they left the hospital with their unborn child. It was in a tiny little package. And he says they went to a secret place where only they knew, and under a spreading banyan tree. While Meg wept, I dug a hole with my hands and set the tiny package softly in the ground. Okay, all right, you guys, I'm really sorry about the miscarriage. If that happened, super sad for them. That's such a burden to bear. Yet there are little things in this story that make me go, what though? Like, what is this business about the hospital gives you the little tiny package? I don't really know the protocols about what they do with the child. So I'm not calling BS on that. I do, however, call BS on digging a hole with your hands and burying the baby on your property illegal. And also with your hands, okay, if you are going to bury, this tiny little package, that child needs to be, you couldn't cough up a couple of bucks to have a decent funeral for this child. You're going to bury him in the backyard like a dead rabbit. I mean, like, this is not a proper remembrance of this child's life. Like, I'm offended by this. Also, with your hands, you couldn't dig deep enough to make sure that was a safe grave for this baby. There's all kinds of wildlife in California. How are you to know that a coyote's not going to come meandering through your backyard? You don't know that. You've not made it safe. Who would just put their little kid, not even in a coffin, in the ground while your wife is silently weeping? That is the most pathetic story I've ever heard, and it's such a lie. And it's not even a good one. If you lost a child and you had its body, you would have a ceremony, you would have a funeral for it. People in the comments, if you had lost a child and you had its body, would you just put him in the backyard? Would you dig a hole with your hands and just chuck the kid's body in the backyard, cover it up, go back in and cross your fingers and hope the coyotes don't come around? That's ridiculous. I do not buy that story. Okay, so I resent them using the pain of a miscarriage to gain our sympathies, because I am sorry if they had a miscarriage. I somehow doubt that they did. And if they didn't, that is the dirtiest trick in the book, to rope people in on a tragedy that they know people can't criticize. Ridiculous. Okay, continuing on. This story was mental. Like, I'm talking about, like, so many of these last stories are just like, he's just like chucking in all the crazy that hadn't made it in yet. He says that 5 months later, it's Christmas. They took Archie to find a Christmas tree. There was a pop-up lot in Santa Barbara, and they bought one of the biggest spruces they had. Again, people with financial difficulties don't go out and spend on a huge Christmas tree. Christmas trees are ridiculously expensive, may I say. And they're over there buying this lavish Christmas tree. If you guys can't afford security and you're over there wringing your hands and calling on all your rich friends to, let's pass the basket around to our rich friends and see who has a donation, you can't afford to go and buy the biggest spruce there is. Anyway, he says it was a magnificent tree. And I guess they felt that they had the right to buy it because several corporate partnerships had opened up, and it had given them a chance to resume their work and to spotlight their causes and to tell the stories that they felt were vital. And let's not forget to pay for security. What stories were they? What stories did you think were vital? Meg's podcast? Whatever happened to that podcast? Is it still up? I don't know. I haven't heard much about it. But who was listening to that? I have not heard one person who listened to that and genuinely was like, man, this is amazing. This is good stuff. This is truth on truth on truth. Never have I heard it. I just, people like cringe listening to it. Okay, so anyway, then it's Christmas Eve. He says they FaceTimed several friends, including a few in Britain. Apparently not his family, though. They didn't bother to call them on Christmas. They watched Archie run around the tree. Everything about their life sounds really, like, lame or something. It's just them and their kid. They're always FaceTiming people, but there doesn't seem to be real people in their lives. It's them just kind of like, sitting back with their phones, a cup of coffee, Archie's on the floor. It seems like they went from like a vital, bustling, busy, fulfilling life to just them in a huge house without anybody. I would not choose that life. Okay, so he says, and this is a story that's weird. Okay, I'm gonna read this to you in its entirety. He says, "We open presents, keeping to the Windsor family tradition." Oh, I think it's because it was on Christmas Eve. For a second, I thought he was saying, okay, all right. It's Christmas Eve, they're opening presents. One little present was a little ornament of the Queen. I roared, "What the?" Meg had spotted it at a local store and thought I might like it. I held it to the light. It was Granny's face to a T. I hung it on an eye-level branch. It made me happy to see her there. Made Meg and me smile. But then Archie, playing round the tree, jostled the stand, shook the tree, and Granny fell. I heard a smash and I turned. Pieces lay all over the floor. Archie ran and grabbed a spray bottle, and for some reason he thought spraying water on the broken pieces would fix it. Oh, funny little boy. And Meg said, "No, Archie, no."
Do not spray, Gran. I grabbed a dustpan and I swept up the pieces, and all the while I was thinking, this is weird.
Yeah, that is the weirdest story. That is such a... What is that story? What is that? Like, a Christmas ornament, it looked like Gran, so crazy. Like, he acts like he's never seen his grandmother's face on things. There is so much on the market with Queen Elizabeth's face on it. Why is he acting like this? Like, she must have had to have this specially made. I mean, okay, that's not obviously the weirdest part of it. Then them hanging the ornament up and then it smashing on the floor, and then Archie trying to get a spray bottle and spraying it to fix it, and then Meg saying, no, Archie, no, do not spray Gran. Like, that is so Megan. Like, what a lame joke. Obviously, that's not the grandmother lying broken on the floor. Why can I wish that I could articulate the way I want to about this story. It's odd. It's kind of twisted. It's just kind of a sick little story. And I don't know why I feel that way. I just feel like it's disrespectful. I feel like it's so typical of Meg to reduce somebody to like a Christmas tree ornament, and then when it gets broken, laugh, don't spray Gran. Like, why is she so disrespectful? Okay, so this story is all about how the royal family is stripping him of everything that he's ever accomplished. He says, except for a few patronages, everything had been stripped away. They took it all away, all of his military associations. He was no longer a captain general of the Royal Marines, and he wasn't going to be permitted to wear his ceremonial military uniforms. Well, because he's not in service of the Queen anymore. And they've made that very clear. But one of the things that was so crushing for him is that when it was Remembrance Day, his whole life, he had always made sure that a wreath was laid by him somewhere in England. But again, here we have this long tale where he's not able to do something. Rather than get up off his ass and do it himself, it's everybody else's fault. He'd asked if on Remembrance Day somebody could lay a wreath for him in honor of the soldiers, but since he couldn't be there to do it, he'd usually done it, but he couldn't be there to do it this year. But the request was denied. So he says that he said, well, in that case, I said, could a wreath be laid somewhere else in Britain on my behalf? Request denied. But in that case, I said, perhaps a wreath could be laid somewhere in the Commonwealth, anywhere and at all on my behalf. Request denied. Nowhere in the world would any proxy be permitted to lay any sort of wreath on any military grave on behalf of Prince Harry, I was told. I pleaded that this would be my first time I'd let a Remembrance Day pass without paying tribute to the fallen, some of whom had been dear friends. Request denied. And in the end, I rang one of my old instructors at Sandhurst, and I asked him to lay my wreath for me. And he suggested the Iraq and Afghanistan Memorial in London, which had just been unveiled a few years earlier. By Granny. Yes, that's perfect, thank you. And he said it would be his honour, and then he added, by the way. He says, by the way, Captain Wales, fuck this, it's proper wrong. Okay, well, Mom, I have one question here. Why don't you lay your own wreath? Why does someone have to do it for you? Look, here's the thing. You're in America now. You've chosen to turn your back on England. So, because of that, you don't get to do all the British customs. You've said, I'm out. I don't want your lifestyle. I don't want to be associated with you. And you didn't get to have it your own way. So what you chose was, I don't want to have anything to do with you. That effectively was your choice. You can say that wasn't my choice, they took it away. No, but you knew that would be the consequence, so it was your choice. All right, well, there's any number of military cemeteries in the United States. You could go to anywhere, okay? Like, we are allies with England, so if you want to celebrate Remembrance Day here in America, by all means, you can lay a wreath here. And I just don't understand why he's acting like, oh, so since they wouldn't do it my way, it couldn't get done at all. Okay, well, make your own way. Like, that's been the whole thing about coming to America. I'm going to make my own way in the world. Okay, well, in this instance, if they won't do what you want, Look, I can see it being frustrating if it really went down that way. I have my doubts, but I can see it being frustrating. Okay, find your own way in the world. If this is the cost, if this is going to be the cost and you have agreed to the cost of leaving the family, then do right and just figure out a way to make it happen. Figure out a way so that you can do Remembrance Day on your own terms, okay? It's that simple. Oh, but no, it's just so much more fun to whine and complain and act like the whole world is against you. All right, and now we come to Tales of Witchcraft and Wizardry, legitimately. So now he's gone to go and see a psychic. It's not going to get better, Harry, if you want to go play with the dark side. I can tell you that much right now. So let me just read this story to you. He says,
I wasn't sure what to call her or what exactly she did. All I knew, she claimed to have powers. I recognized the high percentage of chance of humbuggery, but the woman came with strong recommendations from trusted friends. So I asked myself, what's the harm?
It's the most dangerous question you could ask yourself. I mean, because it really reveals your subconscious knowledge that there is a problem, or else you wouldn't be trying to talk yourself out of it. If you're going to say, what's the harm? It means that you know that there is one, that there is potential problem here. Okay, so anyway, he says the minute they sat down together, he felt an energy around her. I'm sure he did.
Oh, I thought, wow, there's something here.
Okay, but let me just preface all of this by saying, you guys are going to be so disappointed by what she ends up saying. It's not impressive at all. And the fact that he was hoodwinked and taken under by this non-impressive spell, I cannot even.
She felt an energy around me too, and she said, your mother's with you. I know, I felt that of late.
And she said,
no, she's with you, right now. I felt my neck grow warm, my eyes watered. Your mother knows you're looking for clarity. Your mother feels your confusion. She knows that you have so many questions. I do. The answers will come in time. One day in the future, you gotta have patience. Patience. The word caught my throat. In the meantime, the woman said my mother was very proud of me and fully supportive, and she knew it wasn't easy. Your mother says you're living the life she couldn't. You're living the life she wanted for you. I swallowed. I wanted to believe. I wanted every word this woman was saying to be true, but I needed proof, a sign, something. Your mother says, an ornament. Ornament? She was there. Your mother says there's something about an ornament, and she was there, and she says there's something about it. You know anything about this? Your mother says something about a Christmas ornament of a mother or a grandmother or something. It fell, it broke. You know anything about this? And Archie, he trying to fix it or something. You know something about this? Your mother, she had a good laugh about it.
And that's the end of that story. Him and this crazy psycho who is just telling him a bunch of stuff he wants to hear. I mean, okay, admittedly, the stuff about the ornament would have been kind of like a weird sign, but then again, it's like right after Christmas. And how do we even know that what she said specifically, I mean, she could have said something about a Christmas ornament. Like, that is such a vague thing to say. You know, because Christmas ornaments always carry sentimentality. So that could have been interpreted as any number of things. And then she doesn't say right off it was a grandmother. She says of a mother. And then when she saw that wasn't working, she says a grandmother. I mean, he is like the last person in the whole world who should go and see a psychic. He's so impressionable as it is. He could not withstand the influence of the darker world. Okay, if you thought that was a crazy story, we're going on. Just look at this, friends. I mean, we're going now to, do you remember way at the beginning of the book, at the preface, he had met with William and Charles at Frogmore Gardens. Okay. Frogmore Gardens continues. This is the back end of that conversation that we had begun with. Okay, so it's hours after Grandpa's funeral. He's been walking with Willie and Pa. They are not getting it. They don't understand why he went to California. It's like, in his mind, it's all just willful ignorance. Like, how could you guys not know why I left? And they don't. And, okay, let me just say this too before I really get into the story. I was reading it last night, and I, like, was genuinely brought to tears because it was so sad to me to see William at the end of the story. Like, William is fighting for Harry to hear him. And I can't promise I won't tear up again. Probably won't, because I'll be doing Harry's voice. So that how you can't be crying and be doing that voice at the same time. But when I was reading it on my own last night in the bed, I like had to put the book down. And I don't know, maybe I'm hormonal, I'm not sure, but I just felt so sad to see one brother fighting so hard for his other brother. Ugh, painful. Okay, anyway, so they've gone around in circles. Nobody's understanding each other. But then he says, and the thing that enraged Harry so much was that their willful ignorance. Like, why are they acting like they don't get this? And then he was also mad because he said they hadn't even asked about Meg. But they were both keen to know how the lawsuit was going, even though it was Meg's lawsuit. So why didn't they ask about her? He claims it's because the lawsuit directly affected them. Okay, and this is the thing I don't understand. He's so offended that they're only concerned about it because it has to do with them. They're not allowed to have any self-interest. They can't be concerned about the things that concern them. And yet he can be colossally self-interested and self-consumed by ruining his grandfather's funeral, by saying, hey, we're all here to grieve Grandpa, but I gotta catch a plane, so I'm gonna need you guys to meet me out at Frogmore Gardens and rehash all this trash because, you know, you're just not hearing me. So it's okay for him to completely monopolize the situation and the horrible tragedy that they've all come together for. It's okay for him to just continually talk about himself, but they can't question him about this lawsuit that has to do with them. Okay. Always so hypocritical. Okay, so Pa's just like, look, why is it still going? It's just a suicide mission. Nothing's going to come of it. And, you know, Harry just all the day long playing, you know, the noble put upon soldier he's just on a journey for right. He says that, you know, that might be what you think, Pa, but I've got to prove that these people are liars. You know, I have hard evidence. It's like, okay, do you though? If you do, we would love to see it. Because I think it's just that people don't like the paparazzi. People would side with him if he could prove his point, but the thing is he can't. He says, it wasn't about me, it was a matter of public interest. And Pa just, you know, shaking his head. He's like, look, Pa says that he would admit that the journalists are the scum of the earth. That was apparently his phrase. But, and Harry snorts. There was always a but with him when it came to the press because he hated their hate. But oh, how he loved their love. Now Harry goes into, I mean, after that outrageously disrespectful statement, he goes into this pseudo-psychology, little therapy, and he thinks he can be a psychiatrist. He goes, deprived of love as a boy, bullied by schoolmates, he was dangerously, compulsively drawn to the elixir that the press offered him. What? That's like so, I mean, I just can't even imagine saying that about my dad, especially a man who has not actively wronged him. Okay, I get the whole thing with Camilla. I can totally see that would be really, really, really frustrating as a young man and as a child to see your dad with another woman. I get that. But I also think that that is just at the ages that we are, you can't still be, like, you've got to get past it. Against all odds, things have turned out okay. And I just can't fathom where he gets off being so disrespectful, you know. Oh yeah, you would court the press. You're just such a pathetic human being. You need their attention. But Pa is trying to express to him, he's like, look, the thing is that the press is going to demonize you all the time. They're just going to do it. You just have to get over it. But he's like, look at Grandpa. He could do nothing right. But now that he's dead, now he can do nothing wrong. They're not people to be relied on. But all Harry can hear is, oh, so I've got to wait until I'm dead before anybody cares about me. And Pa says, but if you would just endure it, darling boy, for a little while, in a funny way, they would respect you for it. And it's so true, because you look at the way the whole royal family has conducted themselves through the smear campaign of Harry and Meghan. And who do we respect? Do we respect the people who are slinging mud in the streets? Or do we respect the people who are in their quiet and dignified way saying, it's fine, you don't have anything to say. We're not going to dignify that foolishness with a response. And those are the people we respect. Okay, but look at these fighting words. Here Harry comes in swinging.
Speaking of taking things personally, I told them I might learn to endure the press and even forgive their abuse. I might, if my own family hadn't been so complicit. And that was going to take longer to get over. Pa's office, Willie's office, enabled these fiends, if not outright collaborated with them.
Okay, and he says that just recently, allegations that Meg had been a bully had come out. It was their latest Vicious campaign. It was just so shocking and so egregious. And Meg and he had to demolish the lie by submitting a 25-page evidence-filled report to Human Resources that said she had not bullied people. Have we seen that report? What report is that? I don't remember clapping eyes on any 25-page report. Admittedly, I haven't gone digging for it. I'm sure Tom Bauer will inform us of all things fact-related when we get to that. Pa stepped back. Willie shook his head. You know, they're both talking over each other, and they've said it 100 times. Harry, you are delusional. None of us are feeding these stories to the press. In fact, when were these leaks beginning to happen? That's what we would all like to know. Oh, about the time Meghan joined the family. But Harry remains steadfast. You people are the delusional ones. He says that even for the sake of argument, even if he tried to pretend that Willie and Pa hadn't really been kicking him under the bus all these times, their silence was violence. Here it was that his wife had been suffering at the hands of the press. And, well, they wouldn't say anything about it. And that silence was damning. So it didn't really matter if they hadn't fed things to the press. Their whole conduct with the press had been unimpressive. And Pa says to him, again, very seriously, you've got to understand the institution doesn't tell the press what to write. We don't have that right. And thank God they don't, because here's the thing. Today, there might be people in power who you don't care what they tell the media to do, right? That's it's a safety measure that those in power can't tell the press what to write. Because tomorrow it might be some tyrant who's in charge. And then when they get to tell the media what to say, then where are you going to be? You don't want the media to be able to be bossed by those in power. But that's not the way Harry feels about it. Harry's always said, he's never understood our First Amendment right here in the United States, and he certainly wouldn't understand that in England when they have no First Amendment right. In his mind, those in power get to tell the people what to do. So Harry writes, again, I yelped with laughter. It was like Pa saying he couldn't just tell his valet what to do. But even Harry has said earlier in the book, we couldn't control these ghouls. There was nothing we could do. So why are you now shocked that there's nothing Pa can do? Okay, so then William steps in. And William says, look, I think it's really rich that you're over here telling us about colluding with the press when you just got done having an extended interview with Oprah. You want to tell us how that wasn't you colluding with the press to get your narrative out there? Harry concedes that a month earlier, he and Meg had done an interview with Oprah Winfrey. But let him remind you that right days before it had aired, the stories about how Meghan was a bully had come out. So, proving his point, Pa and Willie's office had found out he was going to be on Oprah and decided to do a little of their own mudslinging. How dare they? And he says that, the reason they'd done it is that since leaving Britain, the attacks on he and Meg had been increasing exponentially. They had to do something to make it stop. And silence wasn't working. It was only making it worse. They felt they had no choice. This is always the refrain of the ever addicted attention seeker. You do have a choice. You just don't like the choices, but you have a choice to be quiet. However, after the interview had aired, several people had reached out to him and they were none too pleased with what he'd done. Several close friends. One of Hugh and Emily's sons had come out and said, "What are you doing?" Emily herself had said, "This is shocking. I don't know what you're doing." Even Tiggy had chastised him for the Oprah interview. Thank God there were some people in his life who were like, what the hell was that? How could you reveal such things about your own family? And here we have the junkiest excuse you've ever heard. He says, I told them I failed to see how speaking to Oprah was any different from what my family and their staffs had done for decades. Okay, but then you were not above it then. You don't get to now act holier than thou. You're involved in the same things that you say have been so problematic. If feeding things to the press is what keeps the beast going, then you don't feed things to the press. You don't get to say your behavior is disgusting, so to prove that it's disgusting, I'm also going to be disgusting. That is the action of such an immature person. It's kind of like when you see in like these extremist feminist movements, how they say, men are disgusting pigs who just sleep around and, abuse women and talk horribly about women, and they're the absolute animals. And then you see these women acting like it's liberation to sleep around and speak unkindly about men and act like they're just the scourge of the earth. It's like, you're not making your point, though, by acting exactly like them. And that's how I feel about this. You are not making your point by acting exactly like them. If you think that that's really what's going on and you have always found it problematic, why then would you engage in behavior that you say has been destructive for years? It's not going to be different when you do it. Okay, so that is like the lamest excuse I've ever heard. He says that they chosen an interviewer who was above reproach, and they didn't hide behind phrases like the palace sources. They let people see the words coming out of their mouths. You effing didn't, though. What about when you slung mud and said that there was a racist in the family, but you wouldn't name who the racist was? Don't even with that. And then he says that he was just sick and tired of the whole conversation. They didn't get it. He didn't want to talk to them about it. He tried to say goodbye, take care, good luck, whatever, I'm out. But then Willie, who he says was really steaming, was shouting things. And he says that if things were this bad as Harry made them out to be, then it was Harry's fault for not asking for help. Why didn't he just ask for some help? And Harry completely resents him. But William is like, you never came to us. You never came to me. Why do you come to me and say you needed help? You know I would have helped you. And Harry says, well, since boyhood that had been Willie's position on everything. I must come to him pointedly, directly, formally, on my knees. Otherwise, no aid from the heir. And I wondered why I should have to ask my brother to help me when my wife and I were in peril. If I were being mauled by a bear and he saw, would he wait for us to ask for help? That's so overdramatic, Harry. That's so overdramatic. If you're being mauled by a bear, you're not, though. It's just so dramatic. Okay, this is the part that's truly tragic. He says that he mentioned the Sandringham agreement. He says he'd asked for William's help right then and there, but the agreement was violated. It was shredded. They'd stripped him of everything, and William hadn't even lifted a finger. And William says, that was Granny. Take it up with Granny. I didn't do that. Harry waved a hand, but William lunged and grabbed his shirt. Listen to me, Harold. Listen to me. I pulled away, refusing to meet his gaze. He forced me to look into his eyes. Listen to me, Harold. Listen. I love you, Harold. I want you to be happy. The words flew out of my mouth. Well, I love you too, but your stubbornness is extraordinary. And yours isn't? I pulled away again. He grabbed me again, twisting me to maintain eye contact. Harold, you guys, this is where I started to cry. Harold, you must listen to me. I want you to be happy. Harold, I swear. I swear on Mummy's life. He stopped. I stopped. Pa stopped. He'd gone there. He'd used the secret code, the universal password. Ever since we were boys, those 3 words were to be used only in times of extreme crisis. On Mummy's life. For nearly 25 years, we'd reserved that soul-crushing vow for times when one of us needed to be heard, to be believed, quickly. For times when nothing else would do. And it stopped me cold as it was meant to, not because he'd used it, but because it didn't work. I simply didn't believe him, and I didn't trust him fully. And vice versa. He saw it too. He saw that there He saw that we were in a place of such hurt and doubt that even those sacred words couldn't set us free. How lost we are, I thought, how far we've strayed, how much damage has been done to our love, our bond, and why. And then Harry chalks it up to being the mob and of the press, and it just, no, it isn't them. He says, why has this happened? Because Meghan, you nitwit. Because Meghan, she is the one. She's the one that is behind all of this. You and William might have had your, normal sibling rivalries that would have been exacerbated by the titles that you both held. But even so, it was never like this. It was never like this. And for you not to be able to hear him crying out to you, I want you to be happy. I want you to be happy. I want this for you. Just listen to me. For you not to be able to hear the pain that he's in. Like, where are you, Harry? Where are you? Have you become so entrenched in this lie, so invested in this narrative that the world is against you, that you can't hear the pain in your own brother's voice? Only your pain matters? It's pathetic. And then he goes on this enormously long story about how he was flooded with this memory of he and William, when they had been in Spain, they'd gone on a hunting trip. They were hunting partridges, and they'd both done really well on this hunt. And when it was over, they'd stood up and hugged each other, like really hugged each other. And they were just so jubilant about how, like, they just had such a good time. And he writes, and this is ridiculous, he says that now, and now I saw that even our finest moments and my best memories somehow involve death. Our lives are built on death, our brightest days shadowed by it. Looking back, I didn't see spots of time, but dances with death. I saw how we steeped ourselves in it. We christened and crowned and graduated and married and passed out and passed over our beloved's bones. Windsor Castle itself is a tomb, the walls filled with our ancestors, and the Tower of London was held together with the blood of animals used by the original builders 1,000 years ago to temper the mortar between the bricks. Outsiders called us a cult, but maybe we were a death cult, and wasn't that a little bit more depraved? Even after laying Grandpa to rest, had we not had our fill? Why were we here lurking along the edge of that undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns? I just think that that's the most overdramatic statement I think I've ever read, even in this book. And quite frankly, I mean, I've said that about him. I've said that I think that his greatest moments do tend to be rather dark. Like, he seems to like that. But I think it's because he doesn't know how to feel subtle emotion. If it isn't either great joy or great depression, this is not a state of being that he seems to be familiar with. He cannot just be. There has to be a crisis, there has to be joy or a crisis, joy or a crisis. Otherwise, he's not sure what to do with it. I've said that I think that's true about him, but I don't think that that is true about the family as a whole. And I think, and somebody said this in the comments, I think Harry is an unbelievable projector. And somebody was saying in the comments that if you took everything that he says in this book about everybody else and then applied it to who he is as a person, it's actually really insightful. But the thing is that everything he's saying is about everybody else. And this is like a case study in projection. He definitely does seem to have that really juvenile relationship with pain. Like, when you're a teenager and everything is just so, like, every emotion is just so heavy, and like every emotion is just like when you're sad, you're like devastated. When you're happy, you're so beyond elated. Like, as an adult, you've never been as happy as you were like when you were happy as a teenager. It's like everything is just like these highs and lows and highs and lows. And that's where he is. I mean, he's just such an immature man. Moving on. We're almost done. Look, we're almost done. That's the end. Well, except for the epilogue. But we're almost there. He says that he was out after. It's just like he didn't want to talk anymore. He just left. He was done. And he says that he was like, Willie and Paul were still talking, but he was already gone. He was already on his way to California in his head. And a voice in his head was saying, enough death already, enough. So he goes to the land of California, the land of the walking dead. Okay. And he says that, when was somebody in that family going to finally break free and just go live? Well, not him, because now he's just living on the generosity of strangers. Before he was living off his father, now he just calls up Tyler Perry when he needs a couple bucks. The last section of the book, he skims over the birth of Lilibet. He starts out with, it was slightly easier this time, maybe because we were an ocean away from the old chaos and stress. He says when the big day came, they were a lot more sure, a lot more calm. They drove calmly and sanely to the hospital. Once again, he sends out the bodyguards for food. And then listen to what they're eating. And I'm just like, who's eating this in labor? They brought burgers and fries from In-N-Out, and they got fajitas from a local Mexican restaurant for Meg. He says, we ate and ate, and then did the baby mama dance around the hospital room. What is that? What's the baby mama dance as you're eating your fajita? Like, again, this goes back to, like, they are just so in love with what they think are their charming selves. I mean, truly, quite frankly, I mean, she's got the constitution of a war horse. If she can eat like that and then go on to having a baby, like, my God. Anyway, he says there was nothing but love and joy in the room. After a couple of hours, Meg's like, so when's it going to happen? Soon, we're close. He says this time he didn't touch the laughing gas, but mainly because there wasn't any there. He would have, but unfortunately, there was none there. This time, he says he was fully present. So acknowledging the last time he was totally high as a kite. And he says he was with Meg with every push. So truly, like, he's definitely giving us a little bit more insight into the last episode. I mean, he was truly out of it. If he feels like he's got to say this now, there must have been a real issue with the last time. And again, I just call foul on so much that we're reading here. He says that, the doctor said it was just a matter of minutes. Harry says he told Meg that he wanted his face to be the first one their little girl saw. They knew they were going to have a daughter. Meg nodded, squeezed his hand. He goes and stands by the doctor. They're both crouching there. Okay, can you imagine two men just crouching down between your legs? There's not enough room. The doctor called out, the head is crowning.
Crowning, I thought. Incredible.
He always thinks he's so clever for seeing these little, these little references, these little innuendos. No, you're not. That's just the word. The skin was blue. I worried the baby wasn't getting enough air. Is she choking? I looked at Meg.
One more push, my love. We're so close.
A scream, then a moment of pure liquid silence. It wasn't as something happens. That past and future were suddenly one. It was that the past didn't matter and the future didn't exist. There was only this intense present. The doctor turned to me and shouted, now! Okay, a doctor is not going to let you deliver the baby. They're not going to let you pull the baby out of the vaginal canal. I do not believe it. And if this happened, I'm concerned about this doctor. Wait, cut the cord. Babies are slippery. What are you going to what? I mean, you're up on a table. What if you drop the baby? He claims to have delivered the baby and based off of things he'd seen in films. How many films have you seen where you're watching the baby being delivered?
I slid my hands under the tiny back and neck, gently but firmly, as I'd seen in films. I pulled our precious daughter from that world into this, and I cradled her for just a moment, trying to smile at her, to see her, but honestly, I couldn't see anything. I wanted to say, hello. I wanted to say, where have you come from? I wanted to say, is it better there? Is it peaceful? Are you frightened? What? Don't be. All will be well. I'll keep you safe.
No, I'm sorry. Tyler Perry's already taken that job. He says he surrendered the baby to Meg, skin on skin contact. But he says that when they got home, as their little family of four, when he says, when Meg and I were skin to skin, Meg had said to him, I've never been more in love with you than in that moment.
Really?
Really. She dotted some thoughts in a kind of journal, which she shared. I read them as a love poem. I read them as a statement, a renewal of our vows. I read them as a citation, a remembrance, a proclamation. I read them as a decree. And this is the poem. That was everything. That is a man. That is not a spare. The end. That's the end of the book. Now, there actually is an epilogue, and I'm thinking that I'll do one episode that had sort of like my the epilogue and just my final thoughts, because this video is like right now the timer is at 1 hour and 20 minutes, so I actually do have to go. But that's the end. I don't know what I expected, but those final chapters were not what I expected the end of the book to be. They were the ramblings of somebody who is exceedingly mentally unwell. The story about the ornament, fighting with his dad and brother, and his brother is clearly like so sincere, and he can't even see it and he doesn't even care. The story of the miscarriage, I mean, just like bam, 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 crazy, 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 crazy. The entire ending of the book. He says he's got 400 pages more that he could really tell us some things. I cringe and cower to think of it. I doubt that he does. Now, he could write a book that tells the truth, so maybe he does. I mean, if he came out again with a book, it would need to be like, okay, that one was just a joke, but here's actually the real story. He'll never do it. But anyway, so that was the end. That was the official end of the book. Yes, we have the epilogue, and I'll do a, my final thoughts episode, and then that'll be on Sunday. Starting next week, we're starting Revenge. There'll probably be a couple fewer videos on that, because I have a work engagement that I have to do that is lengthy, and it's like a trip. So I have to do that, which means that I may not be able to film. So we'll see what next week is, but there should definitely be at least one episode next week starting Revenge. So let's, I cannot wait. I mean, when I tell you I cannot wait, I just want to read something that I know has been researched, that has facts. I can't wait to find out what's really going on. Because this drivel was like, I mean, that was like a fever dream. Okay, I'll see you guys later this week. Bye-bye.